He's sitting there laughing with Saros. Oh, I can't believe you saved that, buddy. What a save.
You're listening to the PuckUps podcast. It's time to hit the ice with Brian DeFelice.
Welcome into episode 16 of the PuckUps podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, and thank you all for joining me. The NHL trade deadline has come and gone, and outside of a few minor moves, the Boston Bruins pretty much stood pat. So what do you think about that? Do you agree with their approach? Should they have tried to add to this roster for a playoff push? Or should they have tried to sell a few more assets on expiring contracts? We'll get to that in short order. And we'll also talk about their disappointing loss against the Nashville Predators on Thursday night. And in doing so, ask the question, does David Pastrnak seem off to you? We'll talk about that and the road ahead. But first things first, let's talk about the trades that the Bruins did make on Friday. They sent forward Brett Harrison and defenseman Jackson Edward to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for defenseman Massimo Rizzo and forward Alexis Gendron. Now, make no mistake about it, this is absolutely a minor league trade and a prospect swap. Neither one of these prospects are projected to be impact NHL players if they make the NHL at all. Harrison was a third-round pick by the Bruins in 2021. Edward, a seventh-rounder by Boston in 2022. Rizzo was a seventh-rounder himself in 2019. And Gendron, a seventh-rounder in 2022. So, again, as I said, it's a prospect swap, and it's the organizations giving these players a fresh start, a new opportunity, and a new organization. And it's an opportunity for the organizations to see a few new prospects enter their system. The second and final trade that the Bruins made on deadline day trickled in just after 3 p.m. when we found out that the Bruins acquired forward Lukas Reichel from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for Boston's sixth-round draft pick in 2026. Now, this flyer to me by the Bruins is smart, and it's low risk, medium reward. Reichel's a former first-rounder in 2020 by the Blackhawks, 17th overall. He has 22 goals, 37 assists, 59 points, and 188 games played. So, again, a sixth-round draft pick is pretty low value. I'm not going to lose any sleep over relinquishing a sixth-rounder in any draft year. So, not to say a sixth-rounder can't surprise or become something, but that late in the draft, you're talking real low percentage of that player ever becoming an NHLer. And say what you want about Reichel and the fact that he hasn't really reached his potential just yet. He's the making of an NHL player. He's already played nearly 200 games in his young career, and he does have that first round skill set. His speed and skill is there. Why he didn't pan out in Chicago is not really known by me, who doesn't cover the Blackhawks, but it's not uncommon for a young prospect to not jive with the team that drafts him. What's more interesting to me is that he was only in Vancouver for a small sample, like a Costco sample. And it didn't take long for him to want out of Vancouver. And Vancouver's a dumpster fire right now. They are far and away the worst team in the NHL. They are in the driver's seat for the first overall pick in this year's draft. So you would think that they'd be in a position to want to hang on to a younger player with speed and skill and see if he can become something for them, because Reichel is still young enough. So again, him not panning out in Chicago, it's not crazy. Sometimes, young prospects, the fit's not right with the team that drafts them. Maybe they haven't fully matured to the point that the team is hoping for. It happens. You see it all the time. But the fact that the Canucks traded a fourth rounder for Reichel a year ago, maybe not even, and he's already gone. He's been traded now twice in his young career. That's what I'm curious about. So if there are any Vancouver fans out there or people who are closer to the situation than I am, because to keep tabs on Canucks hockey, I gotta I gotta focus back 3 hours to Pacific time zone, and it's just not as easy out here in the west on the East Coast to follow Vancouver storyline. So I'm curious. I'm curious what's going on there with Reichel in Vancouver and why he didn't work out in such short order. Either way, as it pertains to the Bruins, you're giving up a 6th-rounder for him, and you do bring in a younger player who can play both wing and center on paper, and he has good speed and skill. And most importantly, in this situation, when you're talking about a young player who's bounced around a couple of times, the fit wasn't right in Chicago. It wasn't right in Vancouver. So what makes anybody think that the fit could be right in Boston? Well, perhaps the fact that Reichel is German, and as is Boston Bruins head coach Marco Sturm. And Marco Sturm did not coach the Germans in the 2026 Olympic Games in Milano Cortina, but he did coach the Germans in past Olympic Games. And before making his bones at the NHL level as an assistant coach and a head coach in the AHL, he got his coaching start with German international hockey. And so the fact that there's some familiarity there between Reichel and Sturm, perhaps that's the magic potion for Reichel to finally start to learn under some good guidance and leadership. So we'll see what happens. I think it's an interesting acquisition. I don't think the Bruins really risked much here, giving away a 6th-rounder for Reichel. So he's going to start in Providence, and we'll see what happens of it. He has speed, he has skill, and we've seen over the last calendar year the Bruins take some flyers on some previous players that were kind of not complete unknowns, but they had to prove themselves, right? Like a Marat Husnudinov or Fraser Minton. Players like that, they come in and they perform well. So perhaps Reichel can hit his stride in Boston. Now, as I said off the top, outside of these minor deals, the Bruins stood pat. And so before we discuss if they should have bought more or sold more, I want to read off some of the costs that it took for teams to acquire some players that had been linked to the Bruins this trade deadline season. So Nazem Kadri, he goes to Colorado along with the 2027 4th-round pick, but it costs Colorado a conditional 28 first-round draft pick, a conditional 27 second-round draft pick, Victor Olofsson, and a prospect. So if you wanted Nazem Kadri, you had to give up at least a first-round draft pick and more. And if I'm the Bruins, I like Kadri at that age, not giving up a first-round pick for him. Braden Shen goes to the Islanders for a 2026 first-round pick, 3rd-round pick, and Jonathan Drouin. So again, Braden Shen, I talked about him before. I like him as a player. He's far beyond his prime at this point, but in no world should the Brewers be giving up a first-round pick for Braden Shen. Not happening. Justin Falk, okay? He's a defenseman who had another year left on his deal. He goes to Detroit for a 2026 first-round pick, 3rd-round pick, Justin Hall, and a prospect. So St. Louis, they got a pretty good haul for Falk. But if I'm the Bruins, you're not spending a first-round pick on Justin Falk. He's 33 years old and not happening, okay? John Carlson goes to Anaheim for a conditional 2026 first-round pick and 28 second-round pick. By the way, that was a shocking development that Carlson was traded because it seemed like it caught everybody off guard there in Washington, including some of his now former teammates and Alex Ovechkin and Tom Wilson. But John Carlson, very good, veteran right shot defense, but he's up there in age and he goes for a first-round pick. So if you're the Bruins, you're not spending first-round picks on these players. These other teams that did so, hey, listen, they might be in a different point than the Bruins right now in their organizational development. But Connor Garland, he was linked to the Bruins. He goes to Columbus, who, by the way, are right behind you in the standings by a point. So that's unfortunate. But again, he goes to Columbus for a 2nd and 3rd-round pick. Okay, that's not crazy, but all set with that. Mackenzie Weegar, Okay, he goes to the Utah Mammoth from Calgary, and part of the acquisition cost there for Utah was 3 second-round picks. Now, again, similar to Garland, because there's no first rounder involved, I don't think it's that crazy. But this market, the combination of the players that were available in this trade market, along with some of these acquisition costs that we saw transpire over the course of the day, yeah, like no wonder the Bruins weren't crazy buyers, and we can talk about them, not being massive sellers either, and that's kind of a different conversation, right? We have the buying conversation and the selling conversation. As it pertains to the buying conversation, I'm glad the Bruins didn't go out and overpay for any of these assets. Now, we talked about it before. Robert Thomas, he's a true number one center in the NHL. He's an 80-point guy that has the potential of being even a higher scorer than that with the right line mates. 26 years old. He's a top 5 player in assists per 60 over the last 2, 3, 4 seasons. So he's a legit number one center in his prime at 26 years old. He hasn't gotten traded to this point. So he didn't go anywhere, including Boston. Now, that is one of those players where true number one centers in their prime, they do not become available very often. Very, very rare that happens. So that was an opportunity that we talked about in episodes past where, okay, if he's available and you can somehow get him ideally without giving up James Higgins, then yeah, like that's different because he's a player that can help you now and in the long-term future, and he's a true need for the Bruins. But once it was apparent that he wasn't going to be on the move this deadline, you look around at the rest of the options, I'm all set. And it turns out the Bruins were too. And there were some players who didn't get moved at the deadline this year. I mean, Vincent Trocheck didn't get traded. There are some others that were said to be on the move and they weren't, right? So, I mean, Colton Parayko didn't get traded. Jordan Kyrou didn't get traded. Although Parayko, he would have had he accepted the deal to Buffalo, but he shut it down. But Jordan Kyrou didn't get traded. As I said, Robert Thomas didn't get traded. And there are some other examples. So it wasn't really a sexy trade market out there this year. So, as it pertains to buying, I'm okay that the Bruins did not. And Don Sweeney spoke with the media after the 3 p.m. trade deadline had come and gone, and he was asked about not trading any of his first-round picks. And let's get to what Don Sweeney had to say.
On the first-round picks that you do have, some of the conditions obviously are still up in the air. When it came to adding potentially like another foundational piece or another core piece that could cost one of those picks, did the uncertainty of where those picks may transfer or where they may land give you any pause in terms of a move of that magnitude?
We've had a lot of discussions. You just don't know the forecast of where they are. There's some parameters associated with some of those picks, and where some of those teams currently sit and where it might finish. So yeah, we were definitely trying to forecast what those 4 picks might look like. Certainly knowing kind of our own situation. We didn't move them because they weren't exactly burning a hole in my pocket. But that being said, we explored an awful lot of opportunities that if we felt, to your point of improving our team moving forward, adding to our group, it's areas that we would have done something if it really aligned for us.
So that's an interesting question that was asked, and it's something that was kind of not talked about much heading into the trade deadline. If you're the Bruins, right, everybody knows that Boston has 5 first-round draft picks in their next 3 drafts, and they have 3 second-rounders. What we don't know is exactly where those draft picks will end up, right? And I know that sounds obvious, but especially when you're talking about obtaining other teams' first-round picks, it's sometimes difficult when to know how valuable a pick can be when you don't know where it's going to land. So, for example, in 2026, the Bruins have their own first-round pick, right? And it kind of seems like it's going to be between, 16th and, 18th, 19th overall, maybe 20th. I mean, right now the Bruins, I think, are 11th overall in the NHL. So despite barely hanging on to a playoff spot in the East, they're still 11th overall in the NHL standings because the Western Conference has some teams that are playoff teams in the standings out west, but their point totals are not higher than a lot of the teams in the East. So Boston's own pick in 2026 in the first round, it's going to be a middle tier to bottom third first round pick is what it feels like. And that's a valuable pick, especially in a deep draft. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But they also have Toronto's first round pick in 2026, but that pick is top 5 protected. So right now, Toronto would have the 8th overall pick in the NHL draft pre-lottery. Okay, so that means that before the lottery takes place, they would have the 8th best odds of having the first overall pick. And as we learned last year with the Bruins, who finished the year with the 5th best odds, teams can bump up, right? So the season could end with the Maple Leafs having the 8th best odds to win a lottery. And you could sit there and say, well, the Bruins may end up with the 8th overall pick, but if Toronto ends up in the top 5, that pick stays with Toronto. So, you don't want to be trading away picks before you know what they are. Another example is, especially when they're potential top 10 picks, right? That's kind of a different story. There's a lot of moving pieces. And at the end of the day, you just don't know what these picks are going to end up at right now, but we'll have more clarity once the season ends. So the Bruins holding on to these picks right now, it makes sense. It does make sense. And there's more importantly, there was no deal out there worth giving up these picks for. And that's what Don was pretty much saying. He was saying that, if there was a deal out there that made sense for the Bruins and made the team better, not just right now, but in the future, then yeah, some of those picks become expendable. But when the players aren't out there to be had, no, you keep those in your pocket. Absolutely. No doubt about it. So I'm curious to hear from Bruins fans. Do you feel like the Bruins should have bought in more? Should they have tried to add to this team? I mean, I don't think there are any Bruins fans who are interested in rentals. I think that's fair to say. But I'm sure there's Bruins fans out there who feel like, hey, you know what? Maybe you should have given them at least somebody to help the locker room feel a little bit better heading into, the final 21 games. At least they know that you went out there and got somebody for them. And here's my response to that, because I just don't think that it was worth it, right? I think Don Sweeney's way of adding to the room for this Bruins team was by not subtracting from it, right? I think Don's approach was, hey guys, listen, did I go out there and grab a Rasmus Ristolainen for you? No, because A, he's not a needle mover, and I'm not willing to give up the cost for that. And if Rasmus Ristolainen or, Vincent Trocheck or somebody like that being added to this room was going to make you guys jump through the roof in happiness, well, that's sorry to hear that. But how about this instead? I didn't trade any of you guys away. None of your buddies are gone right now. So I think Sweeney's way of adding to this team, psychologically, was by not subtracting, if that makes any sense. I feel like the Bruins locker room, had they sold some pieces today, would have, psychologically taken a hit. And I don't really think you take much of a hit if you don't trade any of your buddies away. So are they sitting there in the locker room saying, hey, look, Don added 1 or 2 guys for us? No, but they also are all still teammates, and you get to keep the vibes in the room consistent this year. So I do think there's something to be said about that. And not for nothing, but Lucas Reichel, as I said, he has nearly 200 NHL games to his name, and he's going to go to Providence to report. But I would imagine that he's going to get a couple of games in Boston before it's all said and done. Maybe he doesn't, but he could be a spark plug. And James Higgins is a guy who I would expect to play for the Bruins when BC's season ends. So, there are some potential reinforcements coming for this current room right now, despite them not going out there and adding a 33-year-old center or winger to fit this group, or 33-year-old defenseman who would cost you a first-round pick. So I think that that's how I kind of look at it. So as far as buying or lack thereof, I'm not bothered by it with this Bruins team. You kept all of your top assets. You kept all your assets. The only asset the Bruins gave away was Brett Harrison, Jackson Edward, and I promise you, I don't think either one of those were ever going to play for the Bruins, and a 6th rounder. So you still have all of your 5 first-round picks in the next 3 years. You still have all your second-round picks. You still have all your top prospects. So I think that, no problems there. Now, the other shoe of staying pat is it means the Bruins didn't sell any pieces. And I know I just mentioned a minute ago that that's probably by design by Don Sweeney, because he just really didn't think that any of his players would probably garner much of a return. I don't think there's much of a market for Andrew Peeke, maybe a 3rd-round pick. I don't think there was a 1st-rounder out there for Victor Arvidsson. In fact, I think the Bruins are leaning towards extending Victor Arvidsson. Clearly, Marco Sturm likes him in his system. Arvidsson's played well for the Bruins. I could see them signing him to a couple-year bridge deal, not bridge deal, but like a 2-year deal. And I don't think that anybody was willing to trade a 1st-rounder for Victor Arvidsson. Had they been willing to, maybe Don would listen. But let's get to Don Sweeney and his decision to not sell any pieces at this deadline.
Don, did you go down the path of potentially selling anyone off, and was there exploration of that?
Well, you always field calls and players that are available on other teams or potentially available in your own. Other GMs are doing their job as to what's as I said, what's available, but also what teams are willing to explore. And in particular, you may be referring to Arvy and Andrew that are both pending UFAs. I was pretty consistent the other day that those guys have done a nice job. Arvy was arguably our best player last night, and I think the group deserves the opportunity to continue to forge forward. I will do my due diligence and have done it from a standpoint of if we could have improved the future of our hockey club, I would have looked at it as pragmatically as possible and done it. But that being said, it wasn't just about collecting any asset and to take away from the fabric of our group.
All right, so that last line says it all, right? He didn't want to take away from the fabric of our group. And again, as I mentioned a minute ago, if somebody were willing to offer a 1st-round pick for Andrew Peeke or a 1st-round pick for Victor Arvidsson, then I think Don may have been willing to disrupt the fabric of his group. But the combination of the lack of potential return for some of these pending UFAs and what it would do to the room if you did trade them for what just aren't optimal returns, I just think that Don said, look, it's just not worth it. Like, I don't really care to mess up the locker room right now and piss these guys off to get a 3rd-round pick for Andrew Peeke. Now, listen, I'm not saying that's the most responsible logic long-term, but again, whether it's the NHL, whether it's a Starbucks, whether it's a construction company, whether it's a school, whether it's an investment firm, whether it's a law firm, whatever it is, any industry is about managing people. Whatever your product is, whatever you're selling, whatever you're working towards, whatever your mission statement is, if you have employees, it's about managing people. And so I just think that when you're the Bruins and you do have 5 first-round picks in the next 3 years, and you have all your 3rd-rounders, I think, and you have 3 second-rounders, I just think that Don's looking at it and saying, do I need a 3rd at the expense of pissing off my room right now? I don't think so. So, again, if somebody were willing to offer the Bruins legit assets for Arvidsson or Peak services, then yeah, I think Don would have done it. I think the terminology is return on investment, and I just think that Don looked at the ROI in this situation and said it's not worth giving up these guys because it's gonna piss off our players who are trying to buckle down for 21 more games to try to make a playoff push, because the value of making the playoffs is very important right now. Not necessarily that we're going to win a cup this year. if you're Don Sweeney, but you want to start building playoff experience and pedigree as a group. And again, similar to the 07-08 season, right? The Bruins had made the playoffs for the first time in a couple of years, first time since the 03-04 season, which was pre-lockout. And do they win the cup in 07-08? No. But they take the Montreal Canadiens, who were the heavy favorite, who had beaten the Bruins 8 out of 8 times heading into that postseason that season, and they took them to the brink of elimination, and it put the Bruins back on the map in the city of Boston. The following year, the Bruins are the first place team in the Eastern Conference. They sweep the Canadiens in round 1. They get upset by Carolina in round 2. The following year, they're a game away from the conference finals again. David Krejci gets hurt. Bruins blow a 3-0 series lead, 3-0 lead in game 7. And you get some scars and you get some scar tissue. And then the following year, they win the Stanley Cup. So I'm a firm believer that you don't enter the playoffs for the first time as a group and win the Stanley Cup. I do think it takes a couple of playoff appearances as an era, as a group of players to really be put in a position to win a cup. I think there's a trajectory that the Bruins are trying to do by making the playoffs this year. And if Don Sweeney doesn't want to mess with the room for a 3rd round pick for Peak or a 2nd rounder for Arvidsson, I kind of understand where he's coming from. And I'm not losing much sleep over not having those assets for those guys. Like, honestly, the Bruins have a lot of picks and prospects finally in their cupboard right now that it just wasn't the year for much going on. So I'm okay. I think with how the trade deadline transpired for the Bruins. If you wanted them to sell somebody outside of Peak or Arvidsson that I'm not thinking of right now, like if you wanted them to trade somebody who either has a no movement clause or doesn't, like if you wanted them to try to trade Casey Middlestad or Pavel Zacha, I got bad news for you. Like, they're not going to trade those guys when they're trying to make the playoffs. And you may disagree with that because you may think, well, who cares if they make the playoffs? They're not winning the cup this year. It's not always about it's going to sound crazy, but for certain teams, making the playoffs isn't just about winning the cup. It's about building positive momentum for the organization going forward. Okay, so yes, nobody thinks the Bruins are going to win the cup this year, but that doesn't mean that the playoffs still can't be valuable and good experience for this group. You want Fraser Minton playing playoff games. You want potentially James Higgins playing playoff games. You want Marat Husnudinov playing playoff games. Morgan Geekie playing more playoff games. You want Mason Lohrei playing more playoff games. You want Jeremy Swayman to play a playoff series as the guy again, right? So you want Marco Sturm to get coaching experience in the playoffs. There's reasons you want to see if you brought in Nikita Zadorov to be a playoff defenseman for you, right? Like, he's going to be a guy that you don't want to play in the playoffs. You don't want to play Tanner Chanel in the playoffs or Mark Kastelik or like the Bruins' whole MO right now. We joked about it all year. It was piss and vinegar. And the belief was they might not be the sexiest regular season team, but you don't want to play them in the postseason. So let's see how that transpires. Let's see if the Bruins methodology, if there's anything to it. Because if they make the playoffs and they get swept in 4 games, well, maybe you sit there and say, maybe being this big and physical isn't the proper way to go about it. But if the Bruins make the playoffs and they win 2 series and they're beating teams up, and then maybe you're onto something. So you want to see how things pan out, right? And I think you have to make the playoffs to see what your team is really made of. Okay. Now, as far as the playoffs go, there will be no playoffs if the Bruins can't get their shit in order here. And their most recent game against the Nashville Predators was inexcusable. The Preds have been selling off pieces. They were without Ryan O'Reilly, their top center. And you go to the Music City and you get spanked, right? Like, that was not a game to lose, especially in that fashion. You're down 5-1 after the second period, Absolute joke. And I'll tell you something right now. The Bruins have only won 2 of their last 6 games dating back to the Stadium Series. Okay, so you're in the middle of a wild card race, a playoff race. You got Columbus up your ass, who, by the way, thank God you beat them in the first game back from the Olympic break, because you need that cushion on them, which is now down to 1 point. Okay, and you play them twice going forward. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So the Bruins have not been that good really since coming out of break. I think even the Stadium Series game, you give up 6 goals when you were up 5-1 in that game. You're up 5-1 and you lose that game. Inexcusable. Then you lose to the Panthers in a shootout the following game. Then you go to the Olympics. Then you come back from the Olympics and you beat the Blue Jackets in a game where Columbus was better than you. Columbus outchanced you, outgenerated you, and you found a way to win. Kudos. Okay, but then the following game, you play the Flyers and you outplay them, but then you lose. So call it fair is fair. You got outplayed in one, then you outplayed them and lost, right? So you're 1-1 out of the break, right? Then you play the Penguins and Pittsburgh outplays you, but the Bruins find a way to win. Okay, and then you go to Nashville and you get your doors blown off and you look like a JV team doing it. They just looked all out of sync. So I have not liked the Bruins play since they came back from break, and they're 2-2 since then, and they're lucky to be that. The way I look at it, if the results were based off of which team played better, the Bruins should be 1-3 since break. I think they were the better team in one of the games they played since coming back from break, and that's not good enough. Okay, it's not good enough at all. And you look back at this game, and it's up and down the lineup, right? I think, Jonas Corposalo lets in a leaky goal to give Nashville a 1-0 lead. It's a missed back check by David Pastrnak. I mean, I'll give him credit for getting back because he was back, but his stick position was off. He didn't take the lane away when the pass went back to Nick Hague, who, again, the shot shouldn't have gone in on Corposalo, but it does, and now it's 1-0. And then to finish the period, Elias Lindholm has a wide open net. And I'm going to get to him and Pastrnak in a little bit here, but he has a wide open net. Wide open net. And UC Saros, who's on his ass with a defenseman on top of him, still finds a way to get a glove on it and keep the puck out of the net. And Elias Lindholm is furious, and he slams his stick off the ice and slams the stick off the glove. Oh, no. Nope. No, he didn't. He's sitting there laughing with Saros. Oh, I can't believe you saved that, buddy. What a save. Holy, unbelievable. I can't, buddy, come on. Like, it's not a 10 p.m. men's league game where you get stoned by the goalie, and you're giving them, not the time or place. Like, not the time or place. I'm not trying to be harder right now. I'm really not. But when you talk about Elias Lindholm and his inability to really generate and produce offense for this team as their top center, and again, I'm going to get into him in a little bit, I don't want to see you laughing about the goalies robbing you. I get it. You're buddies. You're all buddies. You all know each other. I understand. That was a huge missed opportunity in a critical juncture of the first period, because you enter the second period tied 1-1. It's different than being down 1-0. And what happens at the start of the second period? David Pastrnak, with an ill-advised pass on the power play to Morgan Geekie, easily telegraphed by Nick Perbix, goes down the end and, slides the puck over on essentially a 2-on-0 with a back-checking Geekie, and it's 2-0 Nashville. And here's the thing about Pastrnak on that play, because I do go and watch them practice their power play at Warrior. And I'm telling you guys, like, at Warrior, they oftentimes zip it around without looking. Like, they try these set plays, and it's almost like they get the puck on their stick and they just zip it without looking. That's not, far be it for me to tell some of the top players in the world how to produce offense, but you have to look. You can't just assume that the lane's there. Go back and watch that replay. Nick Perbix, first of all, Pastrnak didn't really sell the shot all that much. And Perbix is watching him, and he sees Geeky's wide open. He knows that Dave is going to Morgan at the top of the circle. And Perbix just easily telegraphs it. So I just find it to be lazy and like, shoot that puck. Not to sound like a hockey parent, but just shoot that puck. And maybe there's a rebound. Maybe Geeky finds the rebound, but it was just a sloppy play, 2-0. I don't know. Geeky had a nice goal after that to make it 2-1. But end of the day, you played a sloppy game, and it's an inexcusable loss. You're down 5-1 after 2. You're not going to win that game. So McAvoy and Arvidsson, they get some garbage time goals in the third period when the game's out of hand, and they make it look a little bit closer than it is. You put yourself in a position to pull the goalie with 3 minutes left, and then again, just poor execution. So listen, there's way too much hockey left in this season for the Bruins to be playing this passive, and their play on the road continues to be an issue. The penalty kill continues to be a bit of an issue. It hasn't been as bad since the Olympic break concluded, but I don't know. So they gotta sharpen up here, and if you lose to the Capitals on Saturday after they just traded away John Carlson and they were in sell mode, and they're not playoff bound, then the Bruins have what they have coming to them. Let's get to head coach Marco Sturman here, what he had to say after the game on the disappointing loss to the Nashville Predators.
Is it perhaps a reminder for guys that there is a threshold in terms of the work level that this team has to meet?
It's a hard league. It's a very hard league, and you see teams who had success last year and look at them this year, all of a sudden they're sellers. You got to work your way in and out every night. I don't care who the opponent is. So again, where we at right now, you got to expect a better. I'm not saying the effort was there. We just got to be smarter than that. And again, that's not our game to play 6 goals against game. Especially a big game like today, that just can't happen.
No, it can't happen. And, it really does start with your top players. And I've mentioned in recent episodes, and I hate the fact that I have to keep talking about Pastrnak because, as I said last episode, you really want to be careful when biting the hand that feeds you. Without David Pastrnak, this team is nowhere near the playoffs, okay? Now, you can say that about a lot of teams when it comes to taking away their top player. So I fully recognize how good Pastrnak is, how much offense he does, and how much he provides and generates, and how much he always has, okay? But he's off right now. He's off, and it's not fair. It's not fair that when he's off, that nobody else really steps up and picks up the slack. That sucks. Something seems off with him right now, and I think he's definitely ailing. I think he's definitely dealing with some sort of lingering injury or injuries. Not that a lot of guys aren't doing that. I mean, most everybody's probably playing through something this time of year. But I noticed some discourse online after the most recent game, and I've seen it the last couple of games about how Pastrnak hasn't seemed good out of the break. And during and after the Nashville game, a lot of people were calling out Pastrnak and saying that he hasn't been very good, and he's on pace to score the lowest amount of goals in over 5-6 seasons, and that's all true, and it's all fair. But I will say this in defense of Pastrnak. Long gone are the days where he has players like Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand and David Krejci who can think the game offensively, not necessarily exactly to his level, but close enough where they can set him up for his goals and his shots. he doesn't really have anybody anymore right now that can set him up. They're not Morgan Geekie. He's a good finisher, and he can make some plays and make some good passes on occasion, no doubt about it, especially on the power play. But at 5-on-5, there aren't a lot of players in this Bruins roster that can set up David the way that he sets up other people. Not that people are going to have the same creativity and playmaking ability as David, but he's an amazing finisher, and I feel like he's overcompensating a bit for the lack of playmaking around him at the forward position, that he's trying to set up everybody else, and it's kind of coming at the expense of his own shot generation. Okay, so I don't want David to lose his creativity. I don't want him to lose his playmaking ability, because it's there. Okay, I just don't want his shooting ability and shot generation to be sacrificed simultaneously. I want it all to be there. And I like Marat Husnudinov. I liked him with Pastrnak earlier this year. I've liked Fraser Minton with Pastrnak earlier this year. There's something about Lindholm and Geekie and Pastrnak as a 5-on-5 line. They have not been good. And I'm telling you right now, it's because there's not a lot of speed on that line. I mean, Pastrnak has speed. He's definitely an above average skater when it comes to edge work and speed, all that stuff, of course. I mean, he's 29 years old now, and the league's getting younger and younger each year. So I don't think his speed is as noticeable as it was when he was younger and the league was older. So there's kind of a gray area there, but by and large, David's still an above average edge work and speedster out there. But Morgan's not a speedster, and Elias Lindholm he's a moving iceberg at times, honestly. And I just feel like Pastrnak, he can't do everything himself. And you know what? If Elias Lindholm is going to continue to be a 5-on-5 offensive anchor for David Pastrnak, then they got to split those two up. I don't care about what Lindholm's contract is or how much he's making or what his no move is. You got to get him away from Pastrnak, or split up the trio of Pastrnak, Geekie, and Lindholm. And to be honest, they have. Like, more recently, it's been Pastrnak, Lindholm, and Husnudinov to start games, and then Geekie, Minton, and Asimont. But then they go back to Geekie, Lindholm, and Pastrnak not too long into the games. And even when Husnudinov is playing with Pastrnak and Lindholm, he's on the wing. And I'm telling you guys, there's something about Elias Lindholm. He just doesn't do any one thing very well offensively. He's not an above average passer. He's not an above average shooter. He has zero one-on-one playmaking ability, and he's not an above average skater or a speedster. He's very much an above average faceoff guy, and he's good defensively, and I'm not trying to take that away from him. But Elias Lindholm, when's the last time you watched Lindholm at 5-on-5 and said, "Oh my God, what a great give and go with Pastrnak there," or what a pass by Lindholm, or what a shot by Lindholm? He doesn't do anything. And to prove my point on Elias Lindholm, right now he has 11 goals, 28 assists, 39 points in 48 games. Okay, that is an 82 game pace of 19 goals, 48 assists, 67 points. Not bad, right? Not bad. But let's look at the numbers a little bit further. So as I said, he has 11 goals, 28 assists, 39 points. He's 11th on the Bruins in 5-on-5 scoring with 16 points. Okay, so only 41% of Elias Lindholm's points are at 5-on-5. Okay, now let's look at David Pastrnak for an example. Pastrnak has 22 goals, 50 assists, 72 points in 56 games. Okay, so he is ranked number 1 on the team in 5-on-5 points. And 51% of them are at 5-on-5. So yes, a lot of David's generation is coming from the power play, nearly half, but he's the highest point scorer on the team, and he's the highest point scorer at 5-on-5 in the team. Elias Lindholm is, fourth or so on the team in scoring overall, or fifth, but he's 11th at 5-on-5. So essentially what I'm saying is he's a power play merchant. And that's great that he's been good in the power play, because the Bruins have a top 5 power play in the league, and you need that, right? So good on him for being good on the power play, and he's been good with Pavel Zacha in neutral zone transitions and zone entries in the power play, and he's been good in the bumper and all that stuff. But at 5-on-5, Elias Lindholm has just not been nearly good enough, and I think that it's one of the reasons why David Pastrnak has kind of altered his role into more of a playmaker. Right now, don't get me wrong, David's always been a playmaker, okay? But here are his numbers the last 3 seasons. And I say the last 3 seasons because he never missed a game. In the 22-3, 23-4, and 24-5 seasons, David played 82 games all year and didn't miss a playoff game either in years that they qualified. So in 22-23, Pastrnak had 61 goals, 52 assists, 113 points in 82 games. 23-24, he had 47 goals, 63 assists, 110 points in 82 games. Last year, he had 43 goals, 63 points, 43 goals, 63 assists, 106 points in 82 games. This year, David's on pace for 32 goals, 73 assists, and 105 points in 80. Well, actually, I take that back. That's an 82-game pace. David will not play a full 82-game season because he already missed some games. But if he did play 82 games this year, his pace would have been 32 goals, 73 assists, 105 points. So, his goal scoring clearly has taken a tick down. His overall point production is relatively, would relatively be the same over 82 games. A couple points shy of his norm the last few years. But my point is his goal scoring is down. And the question is, why is that? And I think it's a combination of reasons. I think he could be playing hurt, but I don't think he has enough offensive playmaking around him. Morgan Geekie's a finisher. He's not a playmaker. Elias Lindholm's not a playmaker. So I just think that if the Bruins want to, optimize their season and optimize their potential as an organization, you have to surround him with better talent. And the good news for the Bruins is that there are some young, prospects on the way. I mean, James Higgins to me is a guy that maybe not this year, but starting next season, you staple him alongside Pastrnak. And you want to talk about a guy who can, find David in the soft areas of the ice, it's going to be Higgins. So I'm looking forward to that possibility. But as far as right now, he needs more help. And as far as Elias Lindholm goes, I have some serious questions about what they're doing with him long term, because right now he's supposed to be their number 1 center, and at 5-on-5, he's in the middle of their roster in scoring. Well, what's he going to be like in a year or two? And what does it look like, when you have James Higgins and Pavel Zacha and Fraser Minton and, all these, where does Elias Lindholm fit in? Now, I know Zacha's not under contract for beyond next season, right? So you can make the case that Zacha doesn't get re-signed and Lindholm's your 2 or 3C or something like that. But I'm telling you guys, he's playing he's generating like a 3C right now. In fact, less than right now. Let me pull this up. Right now, Elias Lindholm is 11th on the Bruins in 5-on-5 scoring with 16 points. Fraser Minton, who is your third line center, has 21 5-on-5 points. So right now, Fraser Minton is outproducing Elias Lindholm in 5-on-5 offensive production. And he's a rookie. So Elias Lindholm isn't even producing as a third line center right now at 5-on-5. Minton's out producing him. So they got, listen, I know he's got a no move for a couple more seasons and he's under contract for a bit, but it's not a story for right now. But the Bruins got to figure out what to do with Elias Lindholm long term, because I don't think that contract is good. Not even so much the contract dollar amount. I just don't think he's gonna fit the lineup very well in a couple of years. I just don't. We'll see what happens there. I wanted to get to another comment from Don Sweeney here, because we're going to talk about the road ahead. And he was asked again after the trade deadline during his press conference about other teams around the Bruins adding at the deadline and the Bruins standing pat. And, if he felt pressure to add when he saw teams like the Islanders, going out and adding players to their roster. And again, it kind of ties back into the conversation about should the Bruins have done more to try to supplement this current roster trying to make the playoffs. And, Columbus went out and made moves. The Islanders went out and made moves. So, teams around the Bruins got better and the Bruins stayed the course. So I was interested to hear Don Sweeney's answer to that question.
When you see teams around you making moves, how difficult is it to resist that temptation just to get in on it, right? Columbus makes their moves and Islanders make their moves. Like, do you feel like where you are now, like it's easier to resist that and trust the process that you have right now?
No, it's not easy. I mean, the competitive nature it's just the way we're wired. And again, I reference the fact that for almost 10 of the years we were in that absolute mindset. I also said that our expectations was for us to be in the exact situation of challenging to be in the playoffs. And that's what we should be doing. I would have liked to have, added to the group to the level that, not comparing to the Islanders or anybody else you talked about. I just think that we would always want to improve our team. Now, we did enough due diligence that maybe that applies, at the draft or afterwards, or maybe we take our picks because we're committed to the process that we started. But I think you're always running different scenarios that you can improve your hockey club, whether that was today or yesterday, but with the mindset of moving forward. That might include some of our younger players that Kev was just talking about. And but that's the mandate. The mandate is to continue to get better. We stayed committed. We there's no question we didn't deviate from what we felt was the right choice. And I'm hopefully that pays dividends right now with the guys that are still here because they've earned that right to carry us forward and moving forward as an organization.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, if you're Don Sweeney, staying the course and not deviating, there's definitely a case to be made that was the right thing to do. No doubt about it. But as it pertains to the trade deadline and the teams around the Bruins adding to their rosters and the Bruins not, listen, Columbus is 1 point back of Boston. And they added Connor Garland. Now, I know earlier I said I wouldn't have, traded for Connor Garland, but that doesn't mean that Columbus didn't get better by bringing him in, right? So they bring in Garland. The Islanders bring in Braden Shen. Again, another player that I said I wouldn't have brought in if I were the Bruins, not at that cost, but it still makes the Islanders better, right? So the thing for the Bruins that they have to really focus on down the stretch here is there's two key areas of improvement from where I stand. They have to address the penalty kill. They've been better at it since coming back from the Olympic break, but you have 21 games to go. And right now the Bruins are 24th in the NHL on a penalty kill at 77.2% kill rate. That's not good enough. And with the amount of penalties the Bruins take, it's an absolute recipe for disaster if they continue to go to the box, especially when you consider their road record and how many games they have remaining on the road. So if you're a Bruins team that has gone 11, 14, and 4 this year on the road, let's call it for what it is, 11 wins, 18 losses. So you're not a good road team at all. And you have one of the worst penalty kills in the league. How do you think going to the box on the road is gonna fare for the Bruins? I mean, I don't have this statistic in front of me, but I would be willing to bet that NHL teams' power plays convert better on home ice than on the road. Of course, you have the pressure of performing in front of your home fans, and if you have a bad power play and you're not generating many shots, or you're losing faceoffs and they're icing it, you're not getting entry, you'll hear the boo birds from your home crowd. And maybe on the road you play a little bit looser on the power play. So I could be wrong about that. Maybe power plays are better on the road, but I think when you have, home crowds cheering for your opponent, I think it's easy to get kind of tense as a penalty kill unit on the road. So those are two areas the Bruins have to get better at. They have to improve the penalty kill, and they have to improve on the road. So I don't know what it is, because the Bruins are one of the best teams in the league on home ice. So clearly it could be a matchup issue. The Bruins don't have last change on the road, and maybe they can't get the matchups that they want. I think that's probably the first thing that comes to my mind. Secondly, I just don't know. Maybe their mental fortitude is just not great on the road when things start to snowball and the fans are chanting against them and the other team gets momentum. I think the Bruins have a hard time stopping other teams' momentums when they have it going, and teams get more momentum on home ice than on the road. So 12 of Boston's 21 remaining games are on the road. So over half their games. And those games include in Tampa Bay against one of the best teams in the conference, against Florida, who obviously the Panthers are not destined for the playoffs this year, but they're still the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions, and they still have a lot of good players over there. And when they're healthy again next year, they'll be to be reckoned with again. But I don't care if the Panthers are 32nd in the NHL when the Bruins play them. The Panthers at home, of course they can beat the Bruins. That's a tough game. On the road against Carolina, a notorious tough place to play. On the road in Montreal, which is a game the Bruins usually get up for. But again, the Canadiens at home, that's not an easy win at all. They're playing on the road against Detroit, a team that you're chasing in the Atlantic Division standings. And then they play twice on the road against the Blue Jackets, a team that's right behind the Bruins, 1 point behind Boston in the standings. Now, the Bruins do have more regulation wins than Columbus, and regulation and overtime wins than Columbus. So if there were a tiebreaker right now, it would go to the Bruins. But you played Columbus twice on the road, including the second to last game of the year. So these aren't just road games the Bruins have coming up to finish the season. They're tough road games and tough environments. So I also think the Bruins have a road game against Buffalo, and the Bruins have not beaten Buffalo in Buffalo this year, to my knowledge. And right now, that building is rocking because the Sabres are playing the best hockey they've played in a decade and a half. Their playoff drought appears to be on the horizon on the verge of ending. And Buffalo in the playoffs normally would be amazing, but try having a 14-year drought and having your first playoff game or your first playoff season on the horizon. That place is going to be buzzing. So that will not be an easy game for the Bruins either on the road, not to mention Buffalo is a hell of a team right now. So the Bruins have a lot of work in front of them. Their GM did not go out there and invest in them for this season, other than to say, I'm not taking anything away from you guys. I'm not taking anybody away from the room. This is the group that you guys have had all year. I'm not tearing you apart, but that's the best that I'll do. I'm not adding to you outside of Reichel, who, again, he's going to start in Providence, and maybe Hagens. He's like, I'm not adding to you guys, but I'm not taking away from you. So your addition I'm adding to you by not subtracting. How's that, guys? So the Bruins are who they are, and it's going to be up to them to battle their way to the finish line and try to have a playoff berth, which I do think is very important for this organization, even if they aren't destined to win the Stanley Cup this year. It's still important to get playoff experience. Now, I will say, if the Bruins were in a situation right now where they did not have 5 first-round picks in the next 3 years, they did not have 3 second-round picks in the next 2 years or 3 years, they did not have James Hagens or Will Zellers or, any of these prospects that they've recouped in the last couple of years, if they didn't have any of this, then I would be saying the playoffs are pointless. You're not going to win, and you need to restock and recoup your picks and prospects. But guess what, guys? I'm not saying that they should be done doing that, because they're not. Like, they're going to get some real prospects this June and next June. They're not done. But you do have those futures now that you didn't have prior to last deadline. So it is a different situation. If they didn't have those things, I would not be sitting here saying, "Oh, the playoffs can still be good if you don't win the cup." No, you have to have you have to have the future lined up. If you have the future lined up, which the Bruins in a lot of ways are starting to do, then it's okay to make the playoffs without winning a cup because you're still building towards something. Okay. So that will do it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to the PuckUps on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me or be a part of the show, you can email me info@thepuckups.com. You can tweet at me on X at @BrianDFelice_. You can tweet at the show at the PuckUps, or you can call and leave a voicemail to be aired right here on this show by calling 617-539-6958. You can comment on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, any of the socials that I put out content on. And I really do appreciate the listenership and the support and the subscribers. Over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed the number is starting to go up. So again, this is a platform that I've started, but it's on behalf of all of you, and the community that we create together is what this is all about for me. So I'm happy to provide that medium for all of us, and this is our show, and it's our community. So thank you all very much for listening, and I will talk to you on Monday.